this time?
Yeah, everything's working.
In that
Everything's
case,
going good.
it's Gasparilla Sunday, right over here in Ybor City, where it all began at 1714 7th Avenue in Ybor City. It's time to jump into the rotation.
Your extra ones there.
Wow, that just gave my heart a flutter. Well, we're here today with a special guest coming up soon, Commissioner Nikki Fried. But for now, let me introduce myself. We are the masters of the universe. I am Gary Stein, the political director and master of public health. My co-host and deputy director is Carlos Angel Jose Ermita, the master of business administration. And from above the beltway, hitting above the beltway, is our executive director, Chris Cano, our master of public administration. And we are the masters of the cannabis industry. And we are here in beautiful Chillum Gallery on a beautiful day where you cannot even possibly tell that yesterday was Gasparilla because they just finished cleaning up all the garbage.
Yeah, you could totally tell like 20 minutes ago, though. This place was gross. There's pizza and sadness all over the street.
Was Pizza Rat visiting us by any chance? Or Pizza Chicken, I guess, would be over at Ybor City. I can just see one of those chickens dragging a piece of pizza down the street.
What if it's like a chicken pizza?
That would work out very well.
That'd be gross. It'd be cannibal chickens.
Speaking of chicken dropping, what's going on in D.C.?
Well, DC is DC. There's always wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. And I think, right now it's really a concern that we get legalization done before the midterms. I know that a lot of folks on the left want to hold President Biden accountable for his promises of legalization, of decriminalization, of rescheduling, of expunging records. Carlos, I believe there's some links where folks can click an action alert. They can send a message to President Biden. You want to run one of those across the screen.
So there you go.
There we go. All right. Tell President Biden follow through on his commitment to expunge marijuana records. I think that is vitally important. Also, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is teaming up. AOC is teaming up with some Republicans to present a bipartisan bill that will empower states to do the same thing and to forgive and go ahead and expunge records. It's called the HOPE Act. Carlos, I think we got a link for that too. You want to flash that across the screen for folks?
What's going on here? I'm sorry, I'm not prepared.
So
the HOPE Act. There we go.
Yeah. What is the chance of getting Congressman Mays on the show?
So, we will continue to do all we can to invite special guests and elected officials on. For the last couple of weeks, we've had Rep. Learned, we have Rep. Rico. Today, we have the Florida Commissioner of Agriculture and candidate for governor of Florida, Nikki Fried, joining us and jumping into rotation here shortly. So we will continue to endeavor to invite any and all politicians who want to jump in the rotation and bring their views to our listeners and to the folks at home. There's some also interesting things developing in that there have been some studies that have come out recently and some court cases that folks should know about. But one study I want to take a moment to real quick and pause on is that medical cannabis treatment reduces daily morphine intake in chronic pain patients. And this is coming out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. According to data published in the Journal of Pain Physician, they actually examined a cohort of 115 chronic pain patients. The majority of folks are between the ages of 50 and 70. And it actually showed that there was a 67% average decrease in patient uses of morphine when those were utilizing medical cannabis. And so I think that chronic pain, which is something that I did a webinar earlier this week on Wednesday on, is really something that is helping a lot of patients, especially a lot of elderly folks who suffer from neuropathy, folks who suffer from fibromyalgia, other types of chronic pain conditions. And it's really important with the opioid crisis being what it is, with the addiction rates being so high and what it is, that folks find relief in a non-addictive manner. And cannabis is really providing that relief.
Now, morphine at this point in time is normally ascribed towards palliative care and hospice use. But there is still use within medical circles in regards to pain, even though it's for many people, many doctors, really not a bridge they want to go to.
Well, Gary, we've tried to address this in our Patient Protection Act in that there are some pain management doctors who don't like the fact that the kickbacks that they get from the pharmaceutical companies to prescribe these pills aren't going to be there because they know they're not getting kickbacks from the MMTCs, the medical cannabis centers. So they don't have a financial incentive in many ways to want to go down the rabbit hole of doing what they need to do to prescribe medical cannabis to their patients. And there's a significant number of doctors in this country that are undereducated when it comes to the effects of medical cannabis. We've had earlier this year some great doctors come on the show, like Dr. Berry, Dr. Block, and I think it's important that we continue to focus on physician advocacy and physician education, because most recently a longitudinal study came out to show that cannabis impacts on lung health are distinct from tobacco. And that is something that has always gotten bundled up in the Just Say No movement, is that, cannabis is much more dangerous, or much more addictive, or much more damaging on the lungs than tobacco. And a study coming out of New Zealand actually showed that smoking cannabis long-term is not associated with the same physiological consequences on lung health as tobacco smoking, according to the American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine. And this was through a team of researchers in New Zealand examining the long-term effects of smoking cannabis and or tobacco among 881 middle-aged adults.
What you got? You got a dog playing in the background there, Kano?
I got a dog fight in the background. I got two big bullies, just going at it. And it's okay. Hey. Go to your cage. Thank you. Have an edible. Thank you. Bye-bye. So, and then going back to looking at some of the other things that have happened recently, just give a quick update. In the state of South Carolina, they actually are moving forward with the medical marijuana bill, and it is very restrictive. It actually looks a lot like our bill here in Florida did when they initially pushed it through. It's very limited. It's not going to allow for smoking. It's not going to allow for home growing, and there's going to be a major concern as far as folks who get medical marijuana ID cards have been forced to give up their guns and their Second Amendment rights. And so it seems like for every 2 steps forward, this is a bill that's going 3 steps back. And so I'm glad that we've had Commissioner Fried as the Commissioner of Agriculture here in Florida, because the Commissioner of Agriculture oversees the concealed weapons permits. And as a medical marijuana patient herself, she's taken a very liberal stance on whether or not you have the right to, have your medicine and have your firearms. And I say a liberal stance, but it's actually much more conservative if you think about it. Nothing should abridge your Second Amendment right in this country, other than the fact that you become a felon and lose that right. And so I think it's important that we have a Commissioner of Agriculture who interprets and is willing to still give out, concealed carry permits and gun registrations to medical marijuana patients, because you have a chronic debilitating condition physically should not preclude you from being able to protect your family or yourself.
And we shall not be abridged, shall we?
Exactly. And one other interesting development that I wanted to update the folks on, Gary, you and I have been working for the past few years to get worker protections for medical marijuana patients passed through the Florida legislature. Well, the New Hampshire Supreme Court just ruled this week in favor of employment protections for its medical cannabis patients. And I as much as I would wish we could get the legislative solution to this, I also wish we had a Supreme Court that was preconditioned or willing to take a look at this. But what they ruled is that people who participate in their state's medical cannabis program, which is around 10,000 people, qualify under the law as individuals with a disability, and therefore employers must make reasonable accommodations for them. In a unanimous decision, they ruled that providing folks with an exception to the company's a company's marijuana drug testing policy is considered a reasonable accommodation, and there's nothing explicitly in statute that excludes the use of therapeutic cannabis as an accommodation. So I think that kudos to New Hampshire Supreme Court for ruling in this case. Here in Florida, we need the same thing. So we're continuing to push for a legislative fix. We definitely want to elect a governor who would be willing to address this. And, one of the things that really pisses me off this week, and Carlos, if you want to run the link on the screen, is Governor DeSantis, when asked in the press, is he in favor of recreational marijuana, said no, it should remain illegal because it's funky, because it stinks, because it has a putrid odor. And as someone who we all know has smoked pot before, damn you, Governor DeSantis, you lying, rickety bastard, for being a pothead who would say that weed stinks. I do not like you for that hypocritical
It
stance.
is like
Now let's
they're
go over the word
running out of
putrid.
shit. They're running out of shit to say. Like at some point, they're just gonna be like, "We don't want marijuana legalized because it's icky."
Now let's be certain. The definition of a putrid is a smell coming from decomposing matter.
Oh,
Now,
so
grant you that some of the MMTCs are selling stuff that's just that bad, but in general, cannabis here, I don't think smells putrid. It doesn't smell like it's moldy and dying. Except for some of the booth that some of the MMTCs are selling right now.
let me get my corporate.
So maybe he's
briefing up.
talking about a particular MMTC when he's mentioning that. I couldn't tell you. Or maybe he's just every time he smells it is when he's going by the dump.
Like maybe if you had more MMTCs in this state, maybe the smell would be better. DeSantis.
Yeah, maybe, but for some odd reason, we haven't gotten any new dispensaries since he gave out the last ones in 2018. I think was the last one, and that again was not through the application process, but through the legal process because they had lawsuits against the state.
He did that weird phony thing where he was like he allowed smoking or called for the legislator to allow smoking, and then he didn't do shit. He even said during he said during that press conference that there was a cartel over the cannabis industry. Like, this guy knows what's going on and he's just fucking us over.
Just so you know, we did get a notice from Nikki. She had to deal with a personal matter this morning, and she's going to try to get on later on in the show. So we will continue to fill the air with useless knowledge between now and then.
Well, hopefully we can present some knowledge to folks that they can find some use for it. So,
well, I was really excited about that New Hampshire Supreme Court thing. We can't get a unanimous decision from our court here in Tallahassee, our Supreme Court, who was filled with conservative judges that were put on by the last two governors on any kind of thing. They can't even give a straight unanimous opinion on whether or not the capital is still in Tallahassee. That's just the case that they are. But they actually said that it is definitely an accommodation which has to be done. And that is exactly what the gist of our bill is. Now, we haven't gotten our two bills in the House and the Senate into committee yet. And we still have to get that done by putting it into health policy, which is the first committee for that one. And just so you know, that is Senators Broder and Manny Cortez, rather. So feel free to send them as many letters as you like. Don't go by email. To actually send them an actual physical letter so they will actually read it, because a lot of things get lost in the shuffle of emails. But they need to get it put on there. And what Senator Polsky had told me, besides the fact that she still does not excuse Dr. Latipo for not putting on the mask when he walked into her office, nor did he accept his answer at the last Senate hearing. But she was saying that right now they're saying that the employment bill makes the folks in health policy uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable? How about losing your job because you're a medical marijuana patient? That'll make you uncomfortable. Being homeless because you have a chronic debilitating condition, that makes you uncomfortable. These goddamn politicians.
And you know how the folks in Tallahassee don't want anybody to feel uncomfortable. That's why they're saying we need to whitewash history so that everybody feels very comfortable in listening about George Washington and the cherry tree, which was a blatant lie.
So they're more comfortable firing people for medical marijuana.
Yeah, that's their comfort factor.
That's their comfort factor.
Maybe
they need to be able to fire people for smoking weed.
Well, maybe we should give them a fear factor.
It's kind of an inside joke. I don't know if we should do inside jokes on the show.
No, I mean, we could go into Joe Rogan, but I think that once we get in, we're going to want to get out.
I just find it ironic that you can, load up on opioids and go to work, but God forbid you smoke a joint when you get home, and then they drug test you at work and you get fired. That's just ludicrous.
I love the commercial watching the guy with a hard hat at a construction site. and he's talking about opioid constipation. And so what we're saying is this guy who works at a construction site is on opiates, and nobody's bothering him. The only big problem they have is his constipation, not the fact that he's on opioids and could possibly kill somebody or get killed.
Well, constipation, once you gotta go, man. You're like operating a forklift or a crane or something and you got diarrhea, you could kill somebody.
Yes, forklifts and diarrhea do not mix.
Imagine if
You
you
heard it
had
here
diarrhea and you were smoking a blunt. Oh my God.
You're killing me, Smalls. You're killing me.
Wow.
You're killing
Oh,
me.
you guys are just not laughing at anything today.
Oh no, that's I'm laughing on the inside.
No, I'm sitting there imagining being in a porta potty on a construction site with a blunt in my mouth and just funking it up. That's what I'm thinking about right now, Carlos.
Porta potties have a putrid smell to them. You know that?
Is there something dying in a porta potty?
You know what? You know what has a putrid smell to it? The bullshit coming out of Governor DeSantis's mouth has a putrid smell to it, or the bullshit coming out of our committee chairs in Tallahassee by not giving our medical marijuana patient protection and employment protection bills a hearing or daylight. That's a putrid smell, if I'm concerned with anything.
Yeah.
With all due respect to our current governor, he spent his entire first year building political capital. He got flower legalized so that we could go ahead and quadruple the industry here in the state of Florida, essentially. And then he took that political capital and he spent it on crack, or bad legislature, I should say.
Who? What? All I heard was crack, Gary. You distracted me.
Talking about that Marion Barry guy.
Oh, I like Marion Barry. I was working in D.C. when he was mayor.
Oh, really?
That was very interesting. Yeah. When he got out of jail, by the way, they gave him a Cadillac to drive around in, and he had somebody plant some cocaine in the glove compartment, and he'd say, "I can't keep this car. It's tainted by cocaine. Somebody put it in there. I'll just sell it," and he kept the cash.
Oh,
so that's Marion Barry for you. God bless his heart.
Well, Marion Barry would definitely do a better job than Ron DeSantis.
Yeah, but I'm wondering what he would have done with the current Washington, D.C. rules and regulations, or push for statehood like what's going on right now. What is going on with statehood in D.C., by the way?
Well, statehood in D.C. is an interesting concept. It would change American electoral politics, which is why when we're so close in this two-party system, where razor-thin majorities hold for one party or the other from election to election, adding two more senators, which clearly would end up swinging, to the blue side of the aisle, is something that the existing structures in D.C. don't necessarily want to do. It's the same thing with statehood for Puerto Rico. I mean, if the Democrats were able to add 4 more U.S. senators, that would definitely swing things, in their way for a very long time. You're going to see conservatives continue to put up that fight, which is sad because the people in D.C., even on the license plates, it says end taxation without representation. And so you see that there is close to 1 million people living in Washington, D.C. who have no representation in the United States Senate, yet they pay taxes and such. And there are more people that are represented there than there are in certain states like the Dakotas and such.
Yeah, most of them in northeast and southeast DC.
I don't know if you guys are reading the comments, but we're getting a lot of comments saying that we need to stop talking and vote out these politicians. But I don't think people understand what's going on here in Florida, and the fact that I honestly I am scared shitless. I talked about this a little bit with
this is true. He has no shit.
But I'm scared shitless. Seriously though, Gary, come on, man. There are so many conservatives that have just moved to Florida.
Yeah,
so many conservatives, and it was so hard to get a vote on anything liberal. I don't know what the liberal minded, I guess, would be the right way to say it, but it was so hard to get a vote for anything that was progressive, if you will.
On the positive side, after Maria, a lot of people from Puerto Rico were forced to move to Florida, and they are more on the progressive side than the Cuban population in Miami. No offense.
Yeah, but no, I fucking get it. Believe me, my parents have a hard time listening to the show. But
it's the media noches versus the Cuban sandwiches. That's basically what it's all about.
But before the pandemic, everything was very 50-50. And now there's a lot of people that are moving to Florida because they hate masks and they love DeSantis and the non-regulations that he have. has, and like it's scary to me that a lot of people think that we'd be able to vote these politicians out that are fucking things over, because I think a lot of people that have these fucking bad ideas have just moved into the state.
Well, Carlos, also the big issue right now is redistricting. That's the big fight that is going to set the stage for the next 10 years. Every 10 years after a U.S. census, we just had one in 2020, politicians meet and they redraw the lines. And the sad part is that who's ever in power are the ones drawing the lines for themselves. So here in Florida, the GOP is now getting to pick its own voters. It's going to be able to figure out, oh, well, if we draw these lines this certain way, we can cheat, our rivals across the aisle out of a seat. And that's why we have these districts that can stretch 6 and 7 counties in this state. And it's like, why do these people in these 7 counties have in common? Well, what they have in common is someone who represents that area that wants to stay in power and that doesn't want to get elected. So in most of our seats in Florida, when you hear that, let's vote them out, they're not battleground seats. There's no possible way to vote folks out when they have already slanted and drawn, a vast majority of voters that are going to vote for them anyways.
And of course, with redistricting right now, it's going to become even harder because some of the maps, the Senate one's not bad. The House one, the governor's one, I think, is ready to talk trash.
So wait, so you guys are saying that even though like I started this whole rent thing scared shitless, that it's even worse than I thought?
Yes, you're welcome. Very much.
Well, fuck.
Very much, Carlos.
So not only are there more conservative voters coming in here, but now the conservatives have the ability to decide where these concentration of voters are and where their voice, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. They can draw their own districts. So, if you have a conservative senator from Polk County who doesn't want all this urban sprawl and coming into their district, they can just shift the lines a few miles a certain way and make sure that they hold on to that strong red base that they have. They don't have to fight into a battleground district. We have battleground districts in the Tampa Bay area. For example, North Tampa, New Tampa, the USF area. That's a seat that I ran for in 2010. That's a battleground district that has shifted from Republican to Democrat multiple times over the past decade. And
with Democrat right now, though.
Yeah, but with redistricting, that could easily change. All you got to do is move the line just a few miles a certain way.
Well, there's been a certain browning of West Tampa that's kind of shifted the thing. We've had all sorts of population shifts, and these things sometimes negate themselves into new districts that are more realistic. I'd love to see Sabatini get voted out in Polk County, but I don't see his district being touched at all. As far as that's concerned, they already put him in the basement in the Capitol building. He's the only office in the basement, and the Republicans put him there. But we don't see any way of getting him out of that particular office. So, for the good folks in Howie in the Hills, sorry, it's just the way it is. But one person asked me a question that I was probably going to ask Commissioner Fried as well: is what is the most important change I think is needed in the cannabis regulations right now?
Well, hold on, Gary. Before you do that, it sounds like it's time for a moment of clarity.
Oh, okay.
Oh shit. Oh gosh. Oh. I'm fucking up. I gotta admit that I'm fucking up.
Oh, that works out well. But let's start out with the title of this thing. What do we do about a problem like DeSantis? And you can sing along if you like. But the fact is, we do have issues regards to the current governor. As we had mentioned earlier, he has been saying after he established flower and after he went and put in those 8 dispensaries that got their licenses from him, that essentially all the action towards our movement stopped at that point in time. And then he started backing off. He has said in the past that as far as adult use is concerned, it's not going to happen on his watch. And we know the way that Tallahassee works. We know that the fact that it's very much a top-down situation where leadership often dictates what the legislature does. Even though there is supposed to be a separation between the executive branch and the legislative branch, you will often find the executive branch dictating to the legislative branch what their goals are. And sometimes they follow along, sometimes they don't. I've seen some pushback from the Senate, but from the House, they're all in. And so oftentimes what DeSantis says goes. So if maybe the situation is we need to get a different governor. As you may have heard before from some other people, we needed somebody else with a little broader idea
Uh-huh.
I mean,
Well,
DeSantis has said in the past that everybody he knows who was on on cannabis for medicinal reasons, so to speak, are right now ne'er do wells that don't have jobs and things of that sort.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, DeSantis grew up in a neighborhood where the worst disease they had there was influenza, as you know, what is the word they use?
it's affluenza, Gary.
Affluenza,
Affluenza.
like affable. Yeah, affluenza. I screwed up that joke, didn't I? But the fact is, I don't think that he gets the gist of what is needed here. And the people who need to use cannabis as medicine, a lot of them are not rich, believe it or not. And yet we've been fighting over this last week in regards to whether or not we can get 2.5 ounces or four ounces at a time. And to be honest with you, I don't know how anybody can afford 4 ounces in the current prices that we have right now. And one of the reasons that we don't have good competition in prices is because in Florida, we don't have retailers as far as cannabis is concerned, not the CBD kind, but the other kind, and we don't have wholesalers.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that wholesalers does is they don't just supply product to the retailer; they also give them guidance. They also vet the products before they get them. Now, the guys in the gas station, they get their stuff from wholesalers, but they have no idea what they're actually putting in there. They just put it in there. But as far as shops like Chillum, they're more discerning because they have a more discerning public. And so, therefore, if we had concerned wholesalers that fill retailers with shops, we could have retail shops that carry as many as 20, 30, 40 brands, not have to worry about going to a dispensary and have them be out of the product that you need or have no alternative for that. So I would like to push, if at all possible, to get retailers and wholesalers into the market. So even if we do have verticals in regards to the cultivators and stuff, if we can use those as brands and have retailers and wholesalers, that'd be one step up towards better pricing and possibly even better quality and things of that sort. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I think that the vertical integration presents a problem because if you can qualify and get a license, you don't necessarily have to have any experience in growing cannabis, which is the system we have now. There's the reason why there's so much corporate booth on the market is because you have, dispensaries, MMTCs that are growing it because it's vertical. They have to grow it in order to put it out there. And they're putting out subpar products. They don't treat their workers well. Folks are have told us and other news outlets in the cannabis space that they work 10 and 12-hour days in their underwear, sweating their asses off in hoop houses, producing moldy subpar medicine. And it just doesn't work. I mean, we were on a call earlier this week with the Office of Medical Marijuana Use. And I recall last week we were jumping on the governor of Mississippi's head because he said 3.5 grams per day for a patient is absolutely too much weed. That's like 11 joints. And I'm thinking, how small do you roll how small do you roll your joints, dude? But more than that, when I did the math for us here in Florida, we have a rolling 35-day allotment.
And you don't want to confuse your joints with wrapped toothpicks. That's important to make certain you have the right size.
Well, what concerns me is that here in Florida, if it's a 2.5 ounces for 30 days, and you do the 35 days, you do the math, that's only 2 grams a day for a patient. That's ludicrous that you think people with chronic debilitating conditions can only smoke 2 grams a day. Now, to be clear, that only applies to smokable flower. It does not apply those limits on concentrates. So, Carlos, someone like yourself, you called it last week, like, hey, I'm good. This doesn't affect me. But if you're a patient who smokes, I mean, that's a major concern. 2 grams a day? That's come on, man. What is this? Soviet Russia? Get the fuck out of here.
You can compensate with concentrates, and especially RSO for cancer patients, because the limit there is so much greater as far as amount of THC that you could consume to treat your condition as opposed to using flower, which is unfortunate because in Israel and other places, it is flower that is being used as their medical product and not necessarily the concentrates.
Well, they can even use it in their hospitals in Israel. I mean, that's medicine.
What's going to happen in Florida is it's just going to push people to use the concentrates. People aren't going to get the relief that they need from the flower, and it's just going to push them on to like harder shit. Like it reminds me of like shit like this happens all the time with marijuana. Like even when you put somebody on probation for marijuana, a lot of times they just graduate to harder drugs. Like they just look for something else to fucking medicate with right? Here is a case where somebody has medical ability to get THC. They want to use the weak stuff, but the government's like saying, no. We have all these concentrates and all this RSO and all these tinctures and all these edibles here for you to use. You don't need to smoke it. That's icky.
Now, one of the things that was discussed on that call this last week was the fact they felt that the director of OMMU felt that the legacy market was not making a large impact because he didn't see any data which verified the fact that people were buying from the legacy market. And I said, well, why don't you do a survey to actually find out? Because you don't have enough data. And if the OMMU is strictly driven by data, then you need to actually get some. That's what it comes down to. Because if you asked the current patients right now who have medical cards how often they have to use a product from the legacy market to fill that gap that they can't get through the MMTCs or whatever, you'd find out that that number is a lot larger. In fact, countrywide, the legacy market is 15 times the size of the legal market. And that is kind of like a huge thing. That is that is where that comes from. But we need to fix a lot of things in the program, and that is just one of them. And also, Chris, before right after you got off the call, I asked the director to come on our show, and he said, well, "Let me put it through the lawyers first, and make certain that and I'll give you a list of what things we can say, what we can't say." And I say, "Boy, that doesn't sound restrictive."
Well, I restrictive like our program. Well, what I find is, I think the comments that are coming in, the listeners, those are the people who need to put these politicians in the hot seat.
Yeah.
In many cases, especially the bureaucrats who are appointed by politicians, it's like, well, if the governor has appointed you to do this job, then you need to do this job to the best of your ability. I mean, for me, as someone who has a master's in public administration, that's what, when I was at USF, we were always trained on. Do the best job possible for the people with the highest ethical standards. And that is what we're seeing from our bureaucrats here in Florida is they're failing to do. They're not looking at the common sense. They're not looking at what the people's needs are. In many ways, they're carrying out through the bureaucracy political agendas. And that's why I was so critical originally of House Bill 679, because when I asked Rep. Learned about that a couple weeks back, I felt as though, wow, well, if you allow medical experts who have a prohibitionist, opinion and slant to what they're doing, then that gets accepted as scientific fact, and they can put up bunk science and bunk studies consistently that to continue to push this 1980s narrative that the cannabis fries your brain.
And we do need more studies, believe it or not necessarily to prove it to us, because we as patients already know what we need to know, but somehow to convince the legislators to push the legislation forward. Like I've been talking to Sheriff Chronister, Sheriff Gualtieri about the use of cannabis, and even with just CBD to officers or first responders who have PTSD, and if they use it when they're off duty and not on call, does it affect their performance whatsoever? And they are actually saying, well, we need to see some research on that first. So my amendment for the employment bill, if we can get it on committee, would be to set up that research thing with USF. Yeah, you guys are listening to me now. I know you got an administrative fee and you're just doing this bit right now. But if we can get USF to go ahead and help spearhead that research to verify the fact that first responders can actually get treatment through cannabis without affecting their performance, but except for in a positive way, because if you eliminate the PTSD, you eliminate the kind of elimination, that hesitation that comes with PTSD when they're at a first responder situation. You don't want those guys having to hesitate because they're suddenly getting that anxiety attack that comes with PTSD.
I mean, firefighters, EMTs see some of the worst, horribly, things when it comes to humanity. You see people die in front of you. You have to drag half-burned bodies out of a building. These people need access to this life-saving measure. Not to mention, we talk about cops as first responders. Look, I have as much issue with policing as possible, but I firmly feel as though if more cops smoke weed, we'd have less issue with our cops on the streets.
You have issues with the cops on our street?
I'm sorry, Gary. Did the Tampa Police Department all of a sudden stop beating up minorities for breakfast? Did Jane Castor just suddenly reform the DUI unit and they stopped pulling people over for money? I'm sorry. Maybe last night when I went to sleep, things changed overnight. Last I could tell, we have a corrupt city government that covers up police abuse. Last time I checked.
Well, Mayor Castor, I know you're listening.
I doubt
Mayor
it.
Castor, if you can hear me,
I know Grady Judd's listening. I don't know about Jane Castor.
yeah, we know that Brady Judd is definitely listening to our show. But
Total
Mayor
fan.
Castor, if you don't hear this, if you're not listening to it, maybe somebody can bring it to your attention because we know that you were one of the very few people that does not have a hangover from Gasparilla because you weren't drinking last night. You were in charge of a massive event, and I think you guys did a really good job. We only had like a dozen arrests yesterday, but we'd love to have you on the show and talk about some of these matters and see just where your ideas are. I mean, we are moving forward with things. This last week, I was in Tallahassee, and I was with Rep. Joseph and her bill in regards to decriminalization. It also has a decent clemency part to it, but the expungement part was a little too weak, and you can't have clemency without expungement. I'm sorry. Those two things for those folks who don't have the definitions right. Chris, you want to go ahead and explain the difference between expungement and clemency?
Well, clemency is shortening people's terms, letting people out of prison. Expungement is cleaning up the records and the paperwork on the back end, which is such a vital part of the social equity aspect of cannabis legalization. People who have went to jail for trying to pay their bills with weed money should not be in jail if the government is using weed money to pay its bills.
It's kind of like it's kind of like having somebody be released from prison and they're put in the middle of a cold field with no clothes on and 4 miles from the nearest town and say you're on your own.
Yeah.
I mean,
So if you have clemency, you've got to have expungement. That's all there is to it.
Well, and that's part of the issue that we continue to have is that in many states you're seeing progress towards a recreational market. You're seeing a vibrant industry, but people are getting left behind as victims of the war on drugs, and that is something that cannot happen. We have to bring people along. We've worked with the Last Prisoner Project, and I think it's important that no one should be in jail for cannabis possession, cannabis distribution. When the states themselves are allowing people to possess it and are allowing these multi-billion-dollar companies to distribute it.
Now we still have federal illegalization, because it's still pretty much an active act as far as keeping it illegal. I think oftentimes they push against legalization in D.C. And in some cases, I actually understand where they're coming from, not from their standpoint, but from my standpoint, that if we do have federal legalization, then corporate cannabis may be the norm. When the folks at Coca-Cola and Atria and those kind of folks start taking over the industry, there will be no chance for any boutique grows or things of that sort. We'll only have large corporations. Now, I often got kind of antsy about Certera when they were constantly putting in CEOs that were presidents of various like alcohol companies or Coca-Cola or Pepsi and things of that sort. They had the guy who was head of Patron at one point in time as head. And now, of course, the CEO of Certera, by the way, who is not Jake Bergman, but is actually Bo Wrigley, the head of the Wrigley Gum Factory. And by the way, he's suing the people who did the strain called Skittles, which is also a product that comes out of Wrigley Gum because they're using that name even though they use a Z instead of an S.
But I mean, Gorilla Glue went through the same thing. The
Girl Scout cookies, man.
Girl Scout cookies. As the cannabis industry becomes legal, you're going to have to compete with legal trademark infringement. I mean, you see it all the time with branding and such. If you have a unique cultivar, I think that's something that also we need to open up. Is why can't I get a patent or a trademark on this strain that I've developed? Right, the U.S. government is still falling short on that as well. I mean, if you're going to say I can't call my stuff Gorilla Glue, well, at least let me get a patent or a trademark for what I can call it.
But as far as naming strains are concerned, I know some people they do some very heavy salivating when they start thinking of names for their strains. And we got wedding cake and this and that, the other thing. But try to stay away from other people's trademarks. With all due respect, they worked hard at their own brands and their own trademarks. Just come up with something that is unique to your own, and not necessarily the name of. For instance, I saw a chocolate bar that says Mr. Goodweed, and it's yellow and red and looks exactly like a Mr. Good bar. And that is the kind of issues that spur regulations that say things like you need to stop moving your products towards minors. They aren't doing it intentionally necessarily. They're actually, having people get that little nostalgic thing back, but the things they used to eat when they were kids. But the actually kids are more attracted to the things that look exactly like the candies they're eating right now. And of course, if people aren't smart enough to keep their product away from kids, which they need to do just as much as they need to put their firearms away from kids, then problems can happen. So let's just kind of cut the difference.
And then there's the strain names that are just like irresponsibly named, like Capis or Alaskan Thunderfuck. And it's like,
Hey,
like
that
you're gonna remember
Mantegusta
that shit.
Thunderfuck is the bomb. Don't you
Well,
shit
like
on ATF.
you're gonna remember shit like that. But like if I'm say my grandma needs medical marijuana and like the strain she needs is cat piss, how the fuck am I gonna get my grandma to fucking smoke cat piss
Or for that matter, what is that new one called? Grandpa's Breath?
or garlic breath?
Yeah, and garlic. It was a cross between garlic breath and Grandpa's dentures or something
Oh
along those lines.
really? Oh shit! I wanna smoke grandpa's breath now. I'm
Well,
getting excited.
speaking of potent weed, Carlos, THCO. That's
Yeah,
something that has been on the talk of folks. Do you have THCO products in your store?
of course I do.
Okay, so for those folks who don't know, THCO acetate was something that was actually discovered during the 1940s, all the way up to the 70s, by the United States military.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually experimented with soldiers up in Maryland called the Edgewood Arsenal experiments. You can actually go to the VA website and learn a lot about this. But basically, they discovered this THC acetate, which is 30 times stronger than Delta 9 THC. And essentially, they were trying to figure out a way to weaponize it. Basically, if they could drop a bomb on either Russians or Vietnamese or communists, whoever the U.S. military, and get them so high that they can't function as soldiers, which was one of the original long-term goals of the program. Obviously, it puttered out, and the U.S. government didn't go anywhere with it. But when you watch movies like Pineapple Express, and it's like, wow, that actually happened. There was some guy who was a soldier. They were testing it out, and he was like, "This is pretty good shit."
There's a lot of people get freaked out with the idea of an acetate with THC, but it's like if you had aspirin, you've had an acetate. Like there's a lot of different acetates out there used in like over the counter medicines. Gary could probably touch on that a little bit.
Well, yeah, because we had a situation a couple of years ago where people were thickening out bad oils by adding in vitamin E acetate, and which was basically in creams and lotions and makeup, but it's not supposed to be ingested. And here we have people who are being told to go ahead and ingest it by breathing it in and after heating it up, and that's why people were getting severe illness, what they call respiratory vape disease, and it practically destroyed the industry. But it was all basically from the black market where people were trying to cut corners and trying to put in as little oil as possible by cutting it with extra oil and then thickening it up, because people realized that if you turn the pen back and forth and see the bubble fly up and down, that it's weak shit.
Hmm.
So that is what happened, and hopefully, again, one of the issues in regards to the legacy market, of course, is the fact that they have no regulation. And now I will tell you that from the very beginning, that I am not a fan of regulation. But then again, those people who refuse to just do the ethical thing, to have the ethical standards, they need to be regulated. I mean, it sounds like a mandate. Nobody likes mandates, right? But I would like to mandate to have a safe product as opposed to just anything they want to put out and anything we'll pay for.
Well, speaking of safe products, Carlos, don't you have a product to review today on the show?
You're just keeping us moving along now, aren't you?
Well, we're talking about concentrates, but how do you take a concentrate?
How do you
take a concentrate?
Show us.
You can either dab it or eat it.
Well, don't just talk about it.
I'm not gonna eat it. I'm gonna dab it. No, I particularly want to. We're gonna go ahead. We're gonna start the Chillum scrutiny here. 1 second. Let's start this off right.
Yeah, this topic.
So, the product that we will be reviewing today is by MJ Arsenal, and I cannot see the name of the rig. What's the name? Liv, what's the name of this rig again? You remember? The Bella by MJ Arsenal. This is a recycler, right? That's pink and purple. And Gary, can you tell me why MJ Arsenal products are freaking cool as fuck?
Because they're cute and they're pretty and they have that purplish pink thing. And this may have a bunch of stacked hearts. And it's kind of like the perfect Valentine's gift. That is a reminder. We got February 14th coming up in a few weeks. The perfect Valentine's gift.
You're actually correct, sir. Like the cuteness has a lot to do with the science behind this product. So MJ Arsenal products are known for being rather small, right? That's a pretty small rig. It can basically the size of my hand. And what they did was they realized that if there's a lot of airflow through the pipe, then you actually destroy terpene content. So the smaller the pipe, the better. This is actually one of their bigger pipes.
So you're saying that more oxidation occurs when you put it through too much air,
Yeah, whatever, science.
as opposed to decarboxylation.
I think it's just that they have like a diagram on their side of their box, right? So for a rig like this, right, the terpene content kind of just fills up the entire rig. But if you got a rig like that set high, right, then you're only getting about that much terpene content in the rig, and you're kind of destroying the effects of the terpenes.
Well, back in the 80s, I had a 3-foot tall bamboo bong. I'm sorry, water pipe.
You can say bong; it don't matter.
Well, you got to be careful of those kind of things. But the fact was that the product that I was smoking at that point in time wasn't much better than the grass on the lawn, or a bag of catnip, for that matter. So there wasn't really any loss there.
Yeah, terpenes have kind of become like the pushing science. Like a lot of people will say they understand terpenes and then come into a dispensary and then ask for like, what's the highest percentage of THC that you got? But people are really starting to now notice terpenes, and even if you don't really know how to fucking pick out your weed, right? It's based off of terpene content, but you still know that terpenes are important, you know.
Well, I was stuck in traffic the other day, and there was a bright purple Maserati in front of me, and at the stoplight, you hear.
While you're telling the story, I'm going to heat up the rig.
That's exactly why I'm doing it. While we're at the stoplight, the guy is just revving up his engine. You can tell just how much power. There must have been like 200, 300 horsepower to this fantastic engine. And he revs and revs it up. And then as soon as the light turns green, he takes off at 10 miles an hour down the street. I say, what a waste of manpower. But maybe he understands that you have to have some kind of control over all that power.
See, I don't know if you noticed, but this is a recycler. So the water that's in here will end up on the top part. You want to do it now, Gary? Oh, God.
Considering that my lungs are not as strong as yours, I think I'm going to hold off on that.
What are you guys looking at?
Yeah, Carlos.
We're looking at you cough your lungs out in the middle of a fucking pandemic, Carlos. That's what they're all looking at you, buddy.
I think I just lost my right eardrum there.
Oh, I got dab sweats. This is how do we rate these? I give this 5 out of 5 chillums.
And it's because of the recycling nature of having it go through a couple different cycles through the water.
That's the thing. It still hits hard, but it actually tastes good. I swear I'm coughing a lot, but it tastes really good. It tasted very citrusy.
For those of you who've never been around Carlos smoking, he always coughs like that after a dab. Doesn't matter what it is.
Because I smoke cigarettes. Okay.
Now, terpenes, for people who don't know, are esters, which means that they impart the taste and smell of the cannabis. And obviously, they're, according to our governor, there's one that makes it taste like rotting meat. But in fact, I've never had a product that smells like rotting meat or tastes like rotting meat. But we do have ones that have mango scent to it and pine scent to it, myrcene and pinene, or linalool, which has lavender in it, which is calming.
If you had one that tasted like rot or smelled like rotten meat, then it would be putrid.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And as far as it's concerned, if you have a high THC but you don't have any terpenes, it's like having a muscle car with no steering wheel. It essentially will go around in circles or won't go anywhere. That's why when they had synthetic Marinol, it basically created a lot of anxiety in people that had it because the THC had no guiding principles to it. And so that's one of the reasons that Marinol never worked.
It's important that if folks are dabbing, and one of the things Carlos did, he used the blowtorch. If you want to get scientific with your medicine, utilizing an e-nail so that way your combustion at the right temperatures is important when it comes to terpenes. Certain terpenes and certain cannabinoids actually combust at different temperatures. And like you said, Gary, if you have too hot of a dab, you'll get all that THC and you won't get any of the flavor.
Yeah. And THC actually burns at a higher temperature. I think it's 234 degrees Fahrenheit. Whereas a lot of the terpenes actually vaporate at a much lower temperature, like 180 to 190. So if you want a more terpy attitude, then use an e-nail that has a temperature gauge where you can dial it down just a little bit.
Well, I just so happened to have gifted Kano there a Puffco Peak for Christmas. That happens to be a perfect time to ask you how are those dabs tasting off of that Puffco Peak.
So the best part about the Puffco Peak is it comes with multiple settings. There's like and they're color coded. So like white is like the hottest setting, red is like the next hottest, and then there's a green setting and there's a blue setting. And I can tell you that dabbing at either a blue or green setting gets you much more flavor. But if you just want to get punched in your lungs like you just did, go ahead and dial it up to the red one or even the white one if you're feeling adventurous. But point being is, I think for a lot of patients, that can make sense too, depending on what's happening. For people with like chronic anxiety, if you're having a panic attack, sometimes you just need something to punch you in the lungs so you'll sit down and calm down. Right, versus someone who, if you're up at work and you're trying to face the day, you're like, I don't want to go to work. Well, a nice low temp dab, to get those terpenes out, to get you going, to calm you down, I think is important. So again, with your medicine, you got to do your research, but you got to find what works best for you. I encourage people all the time, if you're a medical marijuana patient, keep a journal. Write down what strain you're using. Write down your method of ingestion. Write down, what temperature you're smoking it at, if you can get that scientific with it, and find your sweet spot for what works for you. Always go low, start slow, and work your way up to where you need to be. For some people, that's why they're like, oh, I tried edibles, I didn't like them, I had a bad experience. Well, you shouldn't probably pop 4 and 5 cookies because you're hungry. You should take it slow. Start with one. Wait for it to kick in, and then upgrade if you need more.
That is the issue when you get that little hunger ping ahead of time. So don't go with edibles and start smoking ahead of time, because you will get munched in some, not in all strains, but in some strains, and end up taking too many edibles.
Do not get the munchies and eat edibles. That is a bad combination.
For the day.
Well, I guess we're gonna have to save Nikki Fried for another show, huh?
It doesn't sound like she made it here on time. So
unfortunately,
we apologize to everybody who couldn't come. She had a personal issue, and of course, the people who are running for offices, the people who are in offices, actually do have real lives outside of office, and so we need to be cautious of that. And we'll continue to get more of your questions. I noticed that when the questions came in that we were asking to be asked, they came out in like 2 or 3 categories, 2 main categories, where the biggest ones were false information that had to do with their personal life, and questions where you can clearly tell that the person who was asking the question does not know what she does.
Well, yeah, I saw one of those. I posted, hey, Commissioner Fried's coming on the show, and they said, why is she running for governor? You can't even run the medical marijuana program. I'm like, she doesn't run the medical marijuana program. The current governor does.
Everybody, what I posted was like, why didn't I get a license? Why isn't this happening? Why isn't that happening? I'm like, dude, she fucking runs hemp. She doesn't run cannabis. She runs hemp. And they're like, no, but she's dating the CEO of Sutera. It's like, how many levels are you wrong right now? Well, and the most accurate thing that they said, though, like the most like to give her general questions, is the fact that she's running for governor, and she should just have these answers,
Well, in the case that the fact that she's working for governor is one of the best reasons, if you are a single issue voter and your concern has to do with the health aspects of the cannabis program as far as it's working right and working compliant, then you do want somebody in the executive office, because in Florida, the executive office runs the Department of Health. And currently, with the current law, they are in charge of the program. It's why we wanted to get the director of the OMMU on, because he works directly underneath at the pleasure of the governor. Because actually through the Surgeon General and then the governor, because that's the hierarchy there. Although I would like to skip the Surgeon General right now, because I think he's kind of a wackadoodle. Mm-hmm. With all due respect.
And on that note, unless you guys have anything else to say, let's just go ahead and end the show, because that guy is a wackadoodle.
I just want to see Carlos take another dab.
I'll help you out.
Okay, we should go. First off, on a program note, next week we are going to have Bruce Linton on, and he is the founder of Canopy Growth. one of the largest cannabis companies in North America, coming out of Canada, and
Mhm.
he's going to give us a clue as to what the heck is going on uh, in the Great White North and why their program is better or worse than ours.
And I'm pretty sure that we'll get Nikki on here sooner or later.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I hope everything's okay with her.
No, thoughts and prayers go out to Commissioner Freed as she deals with, her personal issues and such. I know that I saw in the comments, some folks are slamming her on some personal issues. And look, when people run for office, yeah, your personal life becomes public. You end up under a lot of scrutiny. I'm not going to make any excuses for the things that people do in their personal life, but we got to also treat people as humans too. I mean, we live in an era where cyberbullying is at an all-time high, where people, we have freedom of speech, but you got to be responsible with that freedom of speech too. I call people out all the time, but I'm not willing to push someone to the point where I'm like, kill yourself. Unless you're, one of those guys who's actually smokes weed and you want to keep it illegal, then, yeah, I'm at that point. Kill your
I mean,
fucking
we are
self.
we are still in primary season at this point in time, so it's interesting that how you see people both in the same party attacking each other and using opposition research, which is where you try to dig up things. And in some cases, they actually don't dig up things but create things. I mean, this goes back to the Revolutionary War. This goes back to where when Quincy Adams was president, they used to use fake news as opposition research and try to propagate it in order to get somebody in office. So scrutinize the
Gary,
information that
this
you get.
country hasn't changed. During the Civil War, we had Democrat newspapers and Republican newspapers, and they would print two different stories of the same battles that happened, and we're still in that society here. In the grand scheme of things, and I see in the comments,
Oh,
you got to support the politicians that
looks like
support you.
Nikki's just came on.
Oh well, Commissioner Free is going to be joining us. So, hey, Commissioner, how you doing?
Hello, guys. Sorry I'm so late.
Hey,
Things came up this morning. I apologize.
Hey, we
it's
were just rapping about how politicians are humans too, and sometimes you get put on unfair standards. So we're glad that everything worked out where you could join us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what were you guys talking about this morning?
well, we were about to end the show.
Oh,
Well,
I promise
but
you
now
guys.
that you're here,
Now that you're here, we'll keep
I
going.
will definitely come back on another time when I can spend some more time with you guys and we can talk all about what's not happening in Florida and what needs to happen in Florida.
well,
Well,
we
I'm
were
glad you
mentioning
mentioned that. That was what we were touching on is some of the happenings in other states. For example, in New Hampshire, their Supreme Court just ruled that medical marijuana patients do essentially qualify as disabled persons, and therefore employers should make reasonable accommodations. Gary and I have been pushing for employment protections for several years now, and because of political realities, we can't get it to go anywhere in the Florida legislature.
Yeah, it's a
yeah, we
problem. That's a real big problem. I mean, because look, at the end of the day, we hear these stories. We all do. Whatever it is, and the fact of the matter is that I can't protect these people who are trying to use this as medicine, trying to make their lives better. And I'd rather them sit and have to take an edible at night versus getting drunk every night. Or what other types of pharmaceutical drugs that they may choose to take to relieve any of their pain and suffering. And people are choosing for a medicinal, healthy, natural way to go through their life. And and I say this a lot. My stepbrother is HIV positive, and so he has had a really difficult time. One on lots of the social stuff aspects of things, but on the medical side, it's really taking a huge toll on his body. And the pain that he has to take from all the other medications that he's on, and but he's also a medical marijuana, user to help with some of the pain. And after, he's finally gotten a stable job and he calls me like 3 weeks ago to a month ago and he's like, hey, is it like they're going to test me? And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, I thought, wouldn't you have known that um, before like you took the job? He's like, no, they just changed their policy that they're going to do drug testing. And I was like, well, let them know that like this is a medical. And he's like, he's going to get fired, and because he's going to test positive, and so that sucks. That sucks, and there's nothing I can do to protect my own stepbrother. Make sure that he's got a job and that he's being safe and feels well. And I hear those stories all the time from teachers to first responders. I mean, even people in my own department who are coming out, I don't want to say coming out of the closet, but coming out and saying, I take medical marijuana. And one of my firefighters actually got, tested positive, and unfortunately he's losing some of his federal credentials. Nothing I can even do to help him, and that gets tied to pay increases inside of the department when he has different certifications. And it sucks. And I don't know how the legislature doesn't hear these stories all the time from their constituents and not want to put these protections in. It's just crazy.
Now, Representative Joseph put out a bill this last week in regards to decriminalizing a lot of the medications, especially for people who have to take what currently are considered Schedule 1, Schedule 2 drugs for
Right.
their conditions. And she's talking about the fact that it does have a clemency piece in it, but not really much of an expungement piece. You serve on the clemency board. How
Yep.
often do they give clemency?
Well, Gary, as you know, the governor continues to cancel clemency meetings. We cancel over the pandemic at least two people that have been waiting online, waiting for 10 years to get in front of us. And unfortunately, the number under this governor for those that have actually received clemency is worse than Rick Scott. Let's put that out there. And so it's pretty bad. And hearing it, we do have changed some of the rules so that there is more of an automatic, that if you are certain offenders, and kind of a little bit how they implemented Amendment 4, which could be a whole nother soapbox. But so we've changed the clemency rules to kind of mirror that of Amendment 4, which means you still need to, if you're trying to get your firearms and some other types of rights back, you still have to go in front of the clemency process. And if you have not paid your fines and fees, then you're also not going to have clemency either and get your rights back. We are one of the only states that does it this way.
Well, Commissioner, hold on, Gary.
Yeah.
That was a good segue. And when you mentioned about firearms, the South Carolina Senate is pushing their medical marijuana bill through their legislature, and their bill looks a lot like ours used to back in 2017. They're not allowing for smokable cannabis, and they're specifically going to deny the Second Amendment rights and the rights to firearms to medical marijuana patients. I know that U.S. Commissioner of Agriculture get to oversee our concealed weapons permits, and you have a different take on that. So could you share with us a little bit about your take on firearms and medical marijuana?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been very public and very open. I've got both cards. That as I've looked at, one, neither Department of Health, when you're applying for your medical marijuana card or when you're getting your concealed weapons permit, no programs ask or even look at each of the other registries. So that's first off. Second of all, because of the concealed program is a creature of statute. I've looked through the statute that there's nothing that I have personally found that precludes somebody from getting a medical marijuana card. So I don't see a conflict between the statutes of getting a concealed permit carry and carrying and actually getting your medical marijuana card. Here is where the kicker comes into place. The ATF forms to purchasing a new gun. That is out of my control and out of my purview, and I'm working on fixing that. I'm not going to spill the beans on what I am talking about, but that is where the problem is, because in the ATF form, I think it's question number 10 echo, that says, are you under the control of or have been addicted to a controlled substance? It's something like that is the questioning. And then they've added an asterisk within, and I have to go back and see exactly when it was done, but probably within the last 5 years, they've added an asterisk on there that specifically says, even if your state has legalized or has a medicinal program, it is still federally illegal, and you have to say yes to this question. So that is the fundamental problem, is on the federal side. I see nothing on the holding of two cards. It's the purchasing of a new gun that is the problem.
Now, let me ask you a question. Does having a DUI disqualify you from getting a carry permit or getting a gun permit?
No.
Isn't that amazing? For
Yeah.
some odd reason, alcohol, which causes people to do kind of crazy things, it does not disqualify you from having a gun and shooting up wherever you want when you're drunk. But I would guess that the average person who is using cannabis as medicine is not going to be as interested in grabbing a gun and firing at anybody when they feel upset.
Correct. Exactly. Well, I am sorry that I kept you guys longer than you typically expect to, but please know that I will be coming back, and it sounds like my fire alarm is picking up some noise here. Thank you guys for understanding a little bit. Please know that I'm with y'all. I'm in this fight together, and I am looking forward to spending some more time talking about these issues and getting us to where we need to be in a society, which is stop the overregulation. This is a plant. This is a natural plant that people have been getting relief from since Moses. Since the beginning of time, and it's time to stop the regulation of this. And sure, we need some regulations to make sure that it's safe for patients and safe for people. I'm not opposed to home grow. I'm not opposed to that at all. Look, as agriculture commissioner, my people are growing tomatoes at home, and people are growing strawberries and blueberries and have their own citrus trees. Why would this be any different, especially because of the medicinal aspect of it? We need more research. We all know the benefits of it, but certainly getting some more of our scientific research done. And I'm just really excited that you guys have these podcasts and that I can be on for a little bit.
Well,
Nikki,
Commissioner, just real two quick things before you go, and Carlos, I know you have some too. But one of the some of our members have concerns is you've done a fantastic job as commissioner in rolling out our hemp program. What does the future spell for your successor? Do you think that if you have a successor, outside of your own party as commissioner of agriculture, that our hemp program is going to go backwards, or is that something that's here to stay?
I have no doubt it's here to stay, because let's remember how the hemp program was created and was passed. Unanimous from the legislature. So it is on both sides. I think that on no matter the three, the committees on both sides, I think there was one no vote on the floor of the House, but everybody else voted for it because this is a nonpartisan issue. Sure, I see it from a different lens. I see it from wanting to expand the cannabis industry, but I think that this is good, safe. Most of my agriculture industry members that are growing it are very thankful that we did this, and it would be a real tragedy if whoever comes after me thinks that this is something that they need to roll back, because you'll hear from agriculture, they love this.
And then one last thing, just this week, and Normal has been very vocal about this. Governor DeSantis says that he's not in favor of recreational cannabis because of the putrid odor that it smells. And so we have a link there. Folks can send a message to tell the governor how they feel in their own words. But how do you feel about the governor saying some outlandish thing like that?
I think I called him an idiot. I think was my tweet about it. And I said, obviously, he didn't have fun at Harvard and Yale, that he's taking it out on all of us. So I think I've been pretty frank about that, we are putting still Black and brown men in jail and in prisons, and are risking, billions of dollars worth of capital investment into our state and green jobs, so that he can have not a smell. Kind of crazy. I wonder if he still smokes cigars.
Carlos, you got the last word here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Honestly, Nikki, I just wanted to give you a moment, let people know how they can get in touch with you and how they can support you.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's very easy. Go to my website, nikkifried.com. That's NIKKIFRIED. And you've got all of my bio, all of the things about me, ways to volunteer, ways to donate. And yes, there is a $4.20 link for donations on my website. And so there's lots of ways. And of course, you can always follow me on Twitter, Nikki Fried, at Nikki Fried. There's lots of ways to follow and get engaged in this campaign. This campaign is based on you all. It is grassroots. It is going to the issues that people talk about every day. It is not to try to divide our state, not to politicize the pandemic. It is truly to say, everybody calm down. If more people probably smoked, we probably wouldn't have a lot of this animosity in our country. Certainly, and that kind of joke, but not really. But, so what you see is what you get. And we'd love for more people to get engaged on this campaign, and certainly for, let's turn our time. Let's get legalization as a top priority in my administration, and let's make this happen.
Yeah, right now you're as Commissioner of Agriculture, you're not actually in charge of the medical cannabis program in the state of Florida. People were asking us, why hasn't she approved our license yet? Well, because she
I
can't.
wish.
But
I
as
wish.
governor, you can do a heck of a lot more for the medical cannabis program than you can do in your current position. You've done so well for the hemp program, and we'll be talking about Delta 8 regulation later. But we're looking forward to seeing what you could possibly do in in the basement office there.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thanks again for having me on today. Sorry for being so late.
No
We will
problem.
see you
Thank
again soon.
See ya.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
And yeah, goodbye, everybody.
You have